Hello, I am Jessie from Jessie at Home, and this is From Scrap to Product. We are going to talk about how to take the scraps that you produce in your everyday life and with your business and turn them into products. And the reason we're doing that is because there are two main benefits to taking your scraps and turning them into products. There is, of course, the eco-conscious benefit of you are going to be creating less trash or, adding less to the landfills or whatever. And also it is financially sound. You are going to be spending less money because if you're using every last bit, or not necessarily every last bit, but the most you possibly can use of the products you have, then you are spending less on buying those supplies and you are adding less to your landfills and producing less waste. With this presentation, you are receiving a handout, and there's a couple important things to know about the handout. In the handout, there is a link to my Discord server, and in the Discord server, there is a channel labeled Upcycling. If you go ahead and hop onto that Upcycling channel, you will be able to let us know where you need help or advice in figuring out, these are my scraps, what do I do with them? Or I'm trying to do this with my scraps. Can somebody give me some advice on how to do this? Hop on in there, ask your questions, share what you've done. Maybe you'll give other people some really great ideas. And, just get some encouragement along the way. The handout also is going to have even more ideas that I'm going to be able to get out in 20 minutes. I'm going to show you some of the things that I've done, but in the handout, I'm going to also talk about some other things that I think might be useful to you based on the scraps that you might have created, because these are simply the scraps that I have created, right? So now let's talk about how to actually go from scrap to product. I basically have a 3-step process. It's pretty easy. Step number 1 is to make a list of all your scraps. Like, seriously, every single scrap. Because you just don't know what might actually come in useful. So you're not only going to list the scraps that happen when you make something. If you're a woodworker, you might have extra offcuts of wood and maybe a little extra of like this color of stain that you use for this special order, but you don't normally use it or whatever. But like, there's more than just what you're thinking of. There's the sawdust, okay? Put it on there. And you might have the little dusty sawdust. You might have some of the more curly Q sawdust that you get from like using a lathe or a planer or something like that, right? Every single scrap, things that you just automatically throw into the trash without even thinking about it, put it on the list, okay? Because you go into that Discord server and you share your list, somebody might tell you that some kinds of sawdust can be used to dye fabric. And you might not have known that. And so you say, oh, well, this is the kind of wood that I used. And they say, yes, that is a wood that can be used to dye fabric with their sawdust. Okay, and you might not have a use for that, but maybe that person says, hey, I can use that. Can I pay you for shipping and you can send it to me? Or I have this thing that you might be able to use, maybe we can trade. So put everything on that list, then you can go into the Discord server and you can share the list, and maybe people there have ideas that you didn't even think of. Okay, so you're not only doing the offcuts or the scraps that you make from creating your product, you also want to think about everything else. The supplies you use to create your products. How did you get them? Maybe you went to the store to buy them, but maybe you ordered them, which means you probably have some packaging. Sure, you probably already thought about reusing the boxes that they were delivered in, right? To ship out your products to other people when they place orders. But sometimes, if you buy a pack of pencils, the pencils themselves come in a box. That's scrap, right? So list it all. And also think about the things that you are doing throughout your day. Maybe you drink a lot of coffee that you make yourself. List those coffee grounds. Again, that's a dye. The cans, if you drink a lot of sodas or drinks that come in cans, those cans, list them. I've seen beautiful art made from upcycled cans. Lots of various crafts made from the soda tab, the little pop tabs that are on the top of cans. All right, so think about all of those things. Just every single scrap you create as you go throughout your day. I get My toilet paper I order from a company called Who Gives a Crap. They, I know, it's very funny, right? But they're into upcycling and being eco-conscious, and in that vein, the toilet paper itself, they don't want to wrap it in plastic because that's not very environmentally friendly. So they wrap it in recycled paper that they've printed a pretty little design on, okay? I keep those paper wrappings. You can iron paper. Don't use steam, but you can iron it. I use that as paper to make various paper crafts. That's not something you would regularly think about with your business, but it is a scrap that happens every couple of months when I get my delivery. So just think about everything, put it all on that list, make it as extensive as possible, and then go on to step 2. Step 2 is pretty much done for you already in the handout, and it is coming up with a list of types of products that you can make as you upcycle your scraps. So I've given you a list. It's 1 page long. What I'm trying to get you to do is come up with general, broad ideas that you will pare down when you know what your scraps are. So I've put a lot of broad ideas on the list. If there are other broad ideas that you think should be on there, go ahead and add them to the list, but don't get too deep down into it yet, because that comes with step 3. Step 3 is taking the list of your scraps and taking the kind of jumping off point brainstorming list of things you can make with your scraps, smooshing them together, and coming up with what you are going to upcycle your scraps into. I'm going to show you some of the products that I've made from my scraps, and hopefully that's going to help you come up with ideas of what you can make from your scraps. Here we have some yarn that I have upcycled into barrettes, pins, ponytail holders, all sorts of fun little tiny things that have used up some of my scraps of yarn that were too small to make other items with that I would normally make. These may be a little bit small to have to worry about shipping and all of that if they're sold individually, but you could sell them in sets. You can include them as thank you gifts if you do things in-person sales. These are great to have a low price point item that will get people in there and buying, that then puts them in the right mood to be spending money and everything. This is a little journal notebook thing that I have made with some leftover scrapbooking paper and just various papers inside here. I believe there's some printer paper, some graph paper. I just did a whole bunch of different kinds of papers, and I made about 20 of these when I went on a crochet themed trip to Ireland. And I thought it would be really fun to make a little journal for everybody going on the trip. So I just used up my scraps and made these as a little gift for everyone going on the trip. It was a lot of fun, okay? But you could also make these and sell them. You can, again, include them as thank you gifts. I used like a little sheep dangle thing that I had that people might use to make stitch holders or whatever, stitch markers. This isn't a finished product. These are just little things I have that have been destashed to me. People love to destash me their stuff, or if they have a relative who used to be to do sewing or knitting or crocheting or whatever, who's passed away, and they don't know what to do with all that stuff. They love to destash it to me because they know that I will either use it or find it a good home. So these little things, I have a whole drawer full of these things that I can use when I'm creating something. Some of these might go together nicely to make a barrette, or to go on a bookmark, or just even to decorate something that I've made that's a full item that I'm selling. These might come in handy for decorating them. If I'm making a little kid dress out of crochet, these might be really cute little designs on the dress to just bring it up a notch. So, keep those little things, because sometimes you're like, oh my God, that's perfect. That's exactly what I need to just take this up one step farther. I have scrap yarn that I keep, and I keep that because sometimes when I'm just watching TV in the evenings with my husband, I will take my little that's not a pom-pom maker, tassel maker, or my pom-pom maker, okay? And I have these in all sorts of different sizes, and I'll use these. I'm so backwards. I'll use these to make little small tassels and pom-poms, and again, I'll keep those with my small accessories to use at later dates on things that I might want to use them with. So there might be a time when you take something that isn't most exactly ecologically conscious, like these plastic pom-pom and tassel makers, but they are very, very handy in making other things that are ecologically conscious. So to me, it was a good deal, right? And I take those and I can do things like make these bookmarks with these little tassels. And these bookmarks are made from upcycled scraps of paper. So this paper here is actually paper that I have dyed with turmeric and with coffee. I had already made my coffee. I used the leftover grounds to make some dye, and I put it on some paper, and I also just mixed some turmeric with some water, some warm water to make dye, and put that on paper. And the paper was literally scrap paper. It was things I had printed out that I no longer needed, notes I had written that I no longer needed. Some of these are from paper that came in bags and swag bags that were people's catalogs and stuff. And I just put dye on them and cut them into strips, and now I've used those strips to braid this together to make a bookmark. I used some leftover thread some decorative embroidery thread to stitch this little design on it, and I made a tassel with that tassel maker. Now I have this super fun little bookmark. I will sometimes sell them in sets of 3 if they're being ordered, because you need to make sure that, you know, it's actually worth the cost of shipping. Or sell them individually if it's in person, or include it as a little thank you gift with, if somebody buys a really like a more expensive handmade book that I've made, I might include a bookmark as a little thank you gift. And I believe I told you about that toilet paper that I get with the paper wrapping. This is a bookmark. It's not done yet. I still need to do the designs on it, but it is made with that wrapping, the paper that wraps that toilet paper. Coasters. Coasters are great, and I have this leftover yarn. These I use at my house, but you could certainly use these, you know, as products that you sell, and they're just extra yarn from a home decor project that I did, and I put them together into this little Celtic knot design, and I use them as coasters. You could make it bigger by placing this on a piece of felt or, you know, some other sturdy fabric, and then wrapping a few rounds of the yarn around it to make it a little bigger if you want it bigger. These little appliques that are on a felt background that you can put a pin back on, you can put a magnet on the back of it, you can not put it on a felt background, and you can use it as an applique that goes on to something you've made. A kind of spin off of this that I absolutely love is keep the cards that people send you. You can take that, you can take just scraps of cardstock, anything like that, and look at the 2 sides. Whichever side is plain, you want to leave alone, or has a really pretty picture on it, you can leave alone. The other side, the less pretty side or the less plain side, draw a shape on. So draw your little shamrock, your heart, whatever makes sense with your products, draw that shape on it, and then you can kind of fill in that shape with whatever glue is going to work based on your next step, and then cover that shape with scrap. So for example, if I had a heart, I might trace that heart with a piece of yarn, and I might just keep on filling it in and filling it in with the yarn, the leftover macrame cord, whatever, or I might just trace the outline of it and then hold the smaller pieces of yarn over it and just clip them to let the fuzz kind of fall into the glue to fill it up to make a little design. If I have wood, I might fill that design up with sawdust. If I do jewelry, I might fill that design up with beads and little tiny clippings of wire that, as long as you have a glue that it's going to stick to, right? You get the little sparkle from the wire and everything. So just think about those various scraps that you make that you might be able to add into these shapes. Then you cut around it, and on the back, if there's a pretty picture, awesome. And if it's just plain, you can write like, thank you. Even if there's a pretty picture, if you have the right color, marker, paint, whatever, you can put thank you on the back, and it's just a little thank you card that you include in with your gifts. Or you could put a pin back on it. You could put a pin back on it and still write thank you where you don't see, where the pin back isn't. Safety pins work as pin backs. If you're selling a pin, I recommend using an actual pin back. But if you're just making a like upcycled thank you gift, You can use a safety pin. There's the side that opens and closes, and there's the other side that is static. Sew or attach securely the static side to the back of your item, and then the side that opens and closes is your pin. You don't need an actual pin back if you're doing like an upcycled little thank you gift. Those safety pins work really well. This is my bag of cut pieces of yarn. I use this for stuffing. You can use it for stuffing amigurumi, little small items. You can use these scraps of thread. You can use scraps of fabric. I have a bigger bag that has fabric scraps that I use for stuffing things sometimes. And you can use that in place of like a polyfill or whatever. You're saving money and you're upcycling. If you have fabric scraps, okay, this was all fabric that I have taken and torn into 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch strips, tied those strips together with a square knot, right over left, left over right, and now crocheted together to make this fun, super fun sun hat that I can sell on my Etsy store or wherever I sell them, right? I love these little guys. These are a little snow family that I have made out of leftover beads and buttons, and you can see their hats are combinations of buttons and beads. This one's all buttons, and they're just little wooden beads that I had floating about, and I wanted a cute little holiday decoration, so I made a bunch of these, and they're actually sitting on buttons too, which makes them stand up nicely. So I just made these with my scraps. You can make bunches of them, and they're inexpensive products that you can give. You can not put the bottom on them, and they might be ornaments, but you want to like come up with something inexpensive that you can make a bunch of. Well, that's one of the ways when your scraps can come in really handy, because something like this, or even the pins or bookmarks or whatever that I showed you, they're inexpensive to make, they're quick, they're easy, and you can make a bunch of them just, while you're having some family time that doesn't involve using your hands. Maybe you're watching TV, you're watching your favorite show every night with your family, and if you're like me, I don't like to watch TV without having something to do, so these are the sorts of things you can be making at that time. Jewelry is another great item to make with upcycled scraps, because you can make earrings, you can make little necklace pendants, you can make earrings out of those pom-poms, tassels. I have a friend who has pom-pom earrings in like every single color imaginable, and it's just tons of fun. And you can also go for larger items that are resellable, like I showed you these hats, right? In addition to that, I made my daughter's prom outfit, and then I made this purse. This purse is actually made with scraps of the fabric that I used for her prom outfit. So I cut it into strips, tied it together just like I did with the hat, and then I crocheted it into, these are like different little squares. Inside, this zipper is just something I had in my stash that had been destashed to me from somebody else. And inside, you can see, is some pretty fabric that was used on the lining of her prom outfit. This fabric is more of the fabric used on her prom outfit. And then the strap is actually soda tabs that have been crocheted together. And the only parts of this purse that are not upcycled, that didn't have another life to begin with or aren't scraps from something else, would be the hardware for attaching the straps. Okay, and there's plastic canvas inside to give this some body. I always have both of those things. I like to always have on hand because they come in very useful. So this entire bag that I can sell for a reasonable price cost me next to nothing to make, just a lot of time. Okay, so hopefully all of this has given you some really good ideas of items you can make by upcycling your scraps. Please pop on over to the Upcycling channel on my Discord server to help you come up with your own ideas, to show off what you've made, and just to have some camaraderie.